Hello there everybody, and welcome to my third Doctor Who review. This is the third Doctor story, The Claws of Axos. Now, after Patrick Troughton left Doctor Who in 1969, the whole television actually was moved to colour in 1970, and Doctor Who's first, Doctor Who, John Pertwee's first story was Spearhead from Space, and John Pertwee, I don't think, was the first choice, although there was a wall of silence on both sides when his name was suggested, because he was used to appearing or did a lot of radio stuff like the Comedy Lark and the Navy I don't know. Anyway, so yes, this story is one of my favourite Doctor Who stories of John Pertwee's era of Doctor Who, and there's quite a few. This one features Unit and the Master and his companion Jo Grant, and it's one of the better stories. And Roger Delgado plays the Master with such brilliance. He's not manic, he's not over the top, he's just charming, and as they say, charm is deceitful. So there's always that underlining malice, and he has those hypnotic eyes, and so. But anyway, I'll feed you the story. The Axons land on Earth, desperately in need of fuel. Their purpose is to exchange the substance they call axonite for some much needed energy. Axonite is a thinking molecule that reproduce any substance, so they claim. As it turns out, it is part of the ship that they travelled in space. The ship is like a single organism, and called Axos, whose whole purpose is to feed itself by draining energy from every planet they go to. So they've been to a lot of planets and they've drained their energy, and then they land on Earth because of the Master, and their whole purpose is going to drain the entire energy out of the whole Earth, including its people. The deception about the axonites' beneficial properties was to facilitate the distribution throughout the whole of the world of Axos, throughout the whole world, so that they can have Axos across the globe. Meanwhile, the Master, who's been captured by the Axonites, used his knowledge of Earth and as a bargaining chip for his life and for his freedom. He manages to escape and get back to the Doctor, and actually use his TARDIS, because the Axonites have got the Master's TARDIS. The Axonites actually are interested in the Doctor's knowledge of time travel as well, and they want to use that knowledge for their own selfish gain, and use it for selfish purposes, like to travel through time as well as space. The Doctor, realising their plans to use Axonites into link. The Doctor realising this, he uses the Axonites' plan against them, and uses his own TARDIS is in a time loop sort of thingy. The Doctor does with every part of the Axonite disappears, and of course they're trapped in this continual time loop. But however, the Time Lords have tricked the Doctor's TARDIS. Not tricked the Doctor, but they've programmed the TARDIS into landing on Earth every time. Because in Patrick Troughton's last story, called The War Games, the Doctor was on trial for interfering. And so they exiled him to Earth, because the Earth is quite vulnerable to all these invasions. And that's where Unit comes in, because Unit was introduced in the Cybermen story, The Invasion, and it's run by not run, but he's in charge is Lethbridge Stewart, who appeared in Web of Fear, and so they attacked where they encountered the Yetis. So Unit has been formed to investigate strange goings on and alien invasions and something like that. As he pointed out to Jamie, when he asks, "You like the secret police?" He says, "No, we only investigate people. We don't actually arrest anybody." So yeah, that is the Claws of Axos. And as I've said, it's one of my favourite stories because, as I say, it's one of those stories that features everything. The Master, Unit, the Doctor's companion, the Doctor, fighting against a common foe. And that was always quite the possible theme. And as I say, this was John Pertwee's second season, his third story in his second season. And Barry Letts and Terry Dixon decided back then, because a lot of the stories of John Pertwee's first season had already been commissioned and written, and because they were very earthbound stories, but they decided that very early on that they were going to provide much variety as possible going on forward. It was only in his third season, I think it was, or was it his fourth, when the Three Doctors is introduced. John Pertwee's Doctor is forgiven, and he can now travel in time and space. And so, yeah. There were the story was written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin. The original story was set in central London and Battersea Power Station, taking place as Nuxton Power Complex. But due to all the budgets, and this is the BBC, Terence Dix asked them to scale down the story just a little bit, and because it proved too expensive and because of the budget restraints, the writer were told to scale it down. After they set out the story outside of London. In the story, there's a lot of snow on the ground because it snowed the previous night, and so exposition had to be explained as this was part of, because the craft had entered into the landing, so this was atmosphere due to the ship landing and everything like that. The films of the Tramp were actually filmed out in Kent, in Dungeness, from where I hail from. So yeah, there were many titles for this story, called Doctor Who and the Gift, The Friendly Invasion, the Axons, and the Vampires from Space. Actually, on the DVD, they have actually included a couple of production, like it going into production, and actually that title is actually used, The Vampire from Space, in 2 of the parts of the production. Location shooting was planned to take place over five days in 1971. Filming, as I said, took place in various locations, including Dungeness, which is here in Kent. John Pertwee established himself firmly as the Doctor. As soon as Spearhead from Space started, you knew he was the Doctor. And so yeah, and the Master was introduced in his second season of his first story, called The Terror of the Autons, as the Autons were introduced in John Pertwee's first story, Spearhead from Space, and then they were introduced again in the second story along with the Master. And John Pertwee had quite such a mixture of stories, and it was all science-based as well. There were lots of science-based stories, and the introduction of reverse the polarity of the neutron flow was introduced as well. The sonic screwdriver was actually introduced in Patrick Troughton's story Fury of the Deep. And John Pertwee has been described as the James Bond of the Doctors, because he liked all his gadgets and his machines and stuff like that. And his last story, Spearhead from Space, you had that car that actually flew. Well, not actually literally flew, it was all CSO and colour separation, and because that was often used a lot in Doctor Who as well, especially in John Pertwee's era. Barry Letts, the producer then, was full for colour separation. I mean, it's not like now where you've got green screen and computer graphics. I mean, they could only deal with what they could deal with back then. John Pertwee was the Doctor for 5 years, from 1970 to 1974. He decided to leave, I think, after the death of Roger Delgado, who went away to film somewhere. I think it was similar to a place I went to on a Spanish cruise. The taxi driver was so fast in trying to get him there that the car literally just flew off, and Roger Delgado and the taxi driver were killed, which really shocked everyone. as I say about my cruise, we went to this place where the hills were quite actually similar. Sorry, were quite similar. They were very steep. Sorry, they were very steep, and you could. The coach had to go around very slowly around these hills, all these like these. So yeah, it was similar to that. So yeah. Anyway, I digress. Sorry. Yeah, so John Pertwee is very good in this story. He's just absolutely fantastic. And he went on, after he left Doctor Who, to do Wurzel Gummidge, which is another fantastic character. I know the BBC have done a lot of remakes on, they've done a couple of remakes of Wurzel Gummidge and what have you. So, to be honest, I haven't really watched them because I grew up watching John Pertwee as Wurzel Gummidge. And it was a shame he left. I think he left because he wanted a little bit more money, but he was also sad that the unit team was breaking up. It was actually John Pertwee's fourth or fifth season that Sarah Jane was introduced, and she later went on to become a companion to the fourth Doctor. Tom Baker, who was actually in the story, who was actually the Doctor for 7 years. So yeah, that's my... So yes, this is my review for The Claws of Axos. I've given you lots of bits and pieces, lots of niblets. I'm sorry it hasn't been as good as previous ones. There really wasn't much to tell really, and but yeah, I've also got my dinner cooking as well, so yeah, that's not really an excuse. But no, I'm sorry this is short and sweet. It's like a lot of the Doctor Who stories, there's not really much to tell about what goes on behind the production, because a lot of it, I don't know, it isn't really written down. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. It's short and sweet, I know. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next week with Logopolis, which was Tom Baker's final story as a Doctor, and the first regeneration story that I'll be covering, because there have been lots of good regeneration stories. For example, Caves of Androzani, that was voted Peter Davison's best story because he actually went out on high, and of course all the rest follows on from there, like from William Hartnell's first regeneration story, which was the 10th Planet, and you had the War Games, the Planet of Spiders, Logopolis, Caves of Androzani. Unfortunately, Colin Baker never actually got a proper regeneration story. I think he did with the audio stories, but he never actually got a televisual regeneration story. That's a whole different story, a whole different thing. And then of course you had Sylvester McCoy with the Paul McGann with the Doctor Who movie. Then it was, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm sorry if this hasn't been as good as reviewing like the films and stuff like that. I'm really sorry about that. Yeah, anyway, tune in next week, my fourth Doctor story, Logopolis. Don't forget next Saturday. I haven't really decided what topic I'm going to be discussing next Saturday. What the video is going to be about next Saturday. I'll think of something. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much again for all the birthday, happy birthdays and everything else. And I shall see you next Saturday, and of course next Sunday. Bye bye for now.